Okay, so today we're going to talk about the scorer and the assistant scorer. And what I thought we would do is actually do a refresher on the score sheet as well, because that's always useful. And then we will go and have a look at one or two incidents where the scorer's work impacts the game, and how that works from there. So the main element of it is that we will look at rules 20, 25 and 26, that scorer and assistant scorer, and the process of scoring. And we'll look at the rule text as usual, the referee guidelines and the casebook. So just to recap, the scoring team, they're part of the crew. They're part of the referee corps, as noted in the rules around referee corps 22 and 23. And they're a very important part of the game, because after all, many people don't notice that they're there, but if they weren't there, then we can get ourselves into a lot of bother. And the scorer can certainly help the whole process of managing the game, right from the start, right from the moment they arrive to the moment they leave. That they are there as almost as a check and balance to everything that the referees do during the game, and decisions around that come within their responsibilities of the score sheet. They can stop the match to ensure that the correct information is recorded. They can advise, and also they will expect the second referee to have a very close working relationship with them during the match. The guidelines make this comment. They say that the scorer's work is very important, particularly during matches where members of the refereeing corps and of the teams may be from different countries. But that doesn't. What that's saying is that the FIVB recognise that when you have lots and lots of different accents or abilities to speak the same language, then it can cause problems for the match. But this works also the same if you are in an MVL game, because there are lots of people who have call things different terminology. They do things different ways that may not be consistent from other matches, and therefore the scorer must be really attentive to be able to work with all of the people, the referee corps, the coaches, and the players, to ensure that the right information is recorded on the score sheet and that we don't have any problems. And the guidelines go on to say that all referees must know how to fill in a score sheet, and if necessary, they must be capable of doing the work of a scorer. And I think I would add something else to that, is that all referees must be able to read a score sheet upside down. Because when you are as a second referee, you need to be able to look at the score sheet from your side of the scorer's table and be able to take the information from it without having to go around and look at it. So you need to get to learn how to read a score sheet from the other side, so upside down, as I say, because that will help you a lot in managing the game. So 25.1 says location of the scorer, and the scorer performs his or her function seated at the scorer's table on the opposite side of the court from and facing the first referee. This is the standard setup, and this should always be the way that the game is presented. And this is simply because, as we now know, the second referee no longer indicates the team to serve. So therefore, the scorer must be able to see the first referee for that information. And if they can't, then they need to ask the second referee to confirm it. So their responsibilities start with filling out the score sheet according to the rules, cooperating with the second referee, as we've already mentioned, and that they do this as part of these responsibilities, they use a buzzer or other sound device to notify irregularities or give signals to the referees on the basis of his or her responsibility. So prior to the match, as we talked about when we looked at the second referee last time, that the second referee should brief the scorer, and they should ensure that they've briefed the scorer to make sure that the scorer has an understanding of the score sheet, to know what level of ability they are. Do they need any help? To check that they have the information of the team rosters. Have they completed the pre-match details before the toss? Do they understand the process for substitutions? Are they going to be timing the intervals? And how are they going to deal with any problems that arise during the game? And what extra steps does the second referee need to take to check their work throughout the match? And all of these items are key so that you know whether the scorer is going to be doing them or not. So if you consider a simple thing in the MVL, you may ask the scorer to ensure that they announce the substitutions. They may do or they may not. You may suddenly turn around to find a substitute stood in the substitution zone, and you've had no announcement at all from the scorer. So you need to know whether they're going to do it, or whether they've done it before, and are they going to do it consistently during the match, so that you know what to expect. So the responsibilities prior to the match. The scorer registers the data of the match and the teams, including the names and the numbers of the liberos, according to the procedures in force, and obtains the signatures of the captains and coaches. Okay, so that's pretty standard. What that's saying is you fill out the key details of the game. Then you receive the lineup sheets from the second referee, and you record the starting lineup, or in international volleyball, you have this sent to you electronically. And if you've failed to receive the lineup sheets on time, then you must notify this fact to the second referee. So it's all about timings and when the scorer has the time to do their work. In our MVL protocol, it is quite clearly stated that the lineup sheets should be presented to the scorer at 12 minutes before the start of the match. And that coincides with the time that the teams normally would have their official warm-up. So you must be prepared as soon as you've gone through the protocol of the toss, you've presented the two teams, and as soon as you've presented the two teams, the second referee must go to the coach and say, "Can I have your lineup sheet, please?" Now, you well know it as well as I do that for a large number of our coaches, that will probably be the first time they've even thought about it. And you need to keep badgering them, because they should not take part in the warm-up if they haven't done it. And you need to make sure that you have it in plenty of time. So be active, and try and give them the advance warning to do it. So one way to do it, as we'll show in a minute, is that when they sign the score sheet to say that they agree with the roster, you give them, or they confirm that they have lineup sheets. And at that point, as a second referee, you can say to them, "I will want that at the start of the official warm-up, so please make sure you have it ready." And that way you can ensure that you have the information you need. The way internationally that we do it is because the lineup sheets are now on the e-bench function within the electronic score sheet, is we don't give them their tablet until they've signed the score sheet. And that encourages them to A, go and sign the score sheet, and B, gives you the opportunity to remind them as well. So it's all about giving them information and telling them what you expect of them. So during the match, the scorer obviously records the points scored. They control the serving order of each team and indicate any error to the referees immediately after the service hit. So an error does not occur until the ball is hit. Okay, so just because the wrong server has hold of the ball when the first referee authorizes the service does not mean that that is a fault until the ball is hit, because they can realize and they can change in that time. They've got 8 seconds, of course, so they have to wait. But as soon as the ball is hit, then the scorer must announce the error to the second referee by pressing the buzzer, blowing the whistle or whatever they've got, or just shouting at the second referee, wrong server would do. They are empowered to acknowledge and announce requests for player substitutions by the use of the buzzer. They control the number, and record the substitutions and the timeouts, informing the second referee. So when it says announce requests for player substitutions, as we'll look at when we get to substitutions, this is the point at which the player enters the substitution zone. So the rules say that the player requests the substitution and the scorer announces it. The second referee authorizes it. So what the process is there is that the scorer should be attentive, looking at the benches on a regular basis to see if any substitutions are approaching. And the second referee can, in this case, as you're all experienced, you'll be doing the same thing as part of your processes during the match, and you will know players sat on the bench that have a paddle, or you will know at a point during the match it is usual for this particular team, for example, to switch the setter and opposite and the opposite and setter. So therefore, you will be expecting that to happen at a particular point around the sort of 16th or so point in the set. So you'll be ready for it and waiting for it to come. And if you know that it's coming, then you can inform the scorer that be aware there is a substitution on this side, and it will come at the point at which the opposite goes to serve. Things like that, just giving them information. And then the scorer notifies the referees of a request for regular game interruption that is out of order. So, for example, it is the third request for a timeout or the seventh request for substitution in a particular set. Or, for example, if it is an illegal substitution, and we will cover that as well. So they announce to their referees the end of sets and the scoring of the 8th point in the deciding set. Well, that pretty much goes without saying. They don't particularly have to announce it to you. They record misconduct warnings, sanctions, and improper requests. And this is where the second referee must be more attentive to make sure that these are recorded correctly, particularly around improper requests. And they record all other events as instructed by the second referee. So exceptional substitutions, recovery time, prolonged interruptions, external interference, redesignation, and all of this sort of stuff, they should be recording, but perhaps on a notepad that sits next to the score sheet, so that they can then transpose that information into the remarks box at the appropriate time in the match, because it may not be appropriate to do it at the time. So they need to have it written down somewhere so they know when the incident occurred, what the score was, which team was involved, etc., etc. And they control the interval between sets. So we know that the interval between sets is 3 minutes, and it's always 3 minutes. It's never less or more. But the scorer controls the first 2 minutes, 30 seconds of it. And at 2 minutes, 30 seconds into the interval, they should press their buzzer or blow their whistle to indicate to the teams that they should now have returned to the court. This gives the second referee 30 seconds to check the lineups so that the set starts on time. So one of the key things that in the MVL that we have to watch out for, obviously, is ensuring that the lineup sheets are presented to the second referee in a timely manner. So whilst the coach may not be particularly keen for you to be badgering them immediately the set has finished, that's the time to keep reminding them that whilst they want to talk to their players, they should have already completed the lineup sheet for the set so that there is no delay. And if they provide it late, you stick to the times, as long as it doesn't come in. Obviously, you cannot let the teams back onto the court until you have the lineup sheets for both teams, simply because one of the coaches may look at the players that have entered the court and know what the opposing lineup is going to be, rotation is going to be, so they may change their mind. So what you need to do is you need to, if the 2 minutes 30 seconds has gone past, then you need to hold the teams off until you have the lineup sheets. And then you need to indicate, obviously, to the first referee which of the two coaches has been holding the proceedings up, so that they can consider as to whether there is any delay that needs to be issued. And then after the match, they record the result. In the case of a protest, and with the previous authorization of the first referee, they may write or permit the team game captain to write on the score sheet a statement on the incident being protested. I think I would expect the team captain or the game captain to dictate that big statement. It's not an essay, so it just needs to be the point at which the protest was agreed. The second referee may have to have been proactive during the game if a protest has been agreed. The first referee may have had to indicate to the second referee that the captain has protested at a certain point in time, so that the score can be recorded and what was the particular issue that was being under protest. I've never seen a protest having been made at a particular time, so it's not something which I would know how it went, so to speak. I've seen teams attempt to protest after the match, but not during it. Okay, and then the final thing for the scorer is to sign the score sheet before obtaining the signatures of the team captains and the referees. So what does the assistant scorer do with the scorer having all of these functions to do? Well, the assistant scorer performs their functions sat next to the scorer at the scorer's table. And their primary function is to support the scorer in their administrative duties, to help them, to be a second pair of eyes, to record replacements involving the libero. Well, the key one here is to ensure that the replacement player and the libero are correct in when they enter the court and when they don't. So there are some times when the scorer needs to do this. The key thing is making sure that there is a rally between replacements, and also to ensure that there are no hidden replacements taking place, particularly at timeouts. Now, this used to occur a lot with the technical timeout, but as we move away from technical timeouts, it is less the case that you will get hidden replacements, but you do need to be aware of a replacement. So if you have a timeout at a point of replacement, the replacement takes place after the timeout and not before, unless it's been absolutely clear that it's happened beforehand. So the assistant scorer also needs to be able to take over from the scorer if the scorer cannot continue their duties, and they must, if necessary, have a replacement score sheet available, which they can bring into play if necessary. Not often something that you will see, and pretty much now, even with electronic scoring, there is now a backup laptop rather than a backup score sheet. So it's unlikely that you'll need to do that. So prior to the match and the set, the assistant scorer prepares the libero control sheet, and it says reserve score sheet, but as I say, that's unlikely to be required. Then during the match, they record the details of the replacements and redesignations, just to make sure that there is no error. They notify the referees of any fault in the libero replacement. They start and end the timing of technical timeouts if they're in use, and the intervals between sets. And they operate the manual scoreboard on the scorer's table and check that if there are multiple scoreboards in use, that they all agree and that they agree with the scorer's view of the score. Okay. And at the end of the match, obviously they sign the score sheet before the scorer. So assistant scorer captain A, captain B, or referee 2, referee 1, in order of signing, or the captains can obviously be interchangeable, but the assistant scorer would sign first to help. So in terms of the MPL, you probably have them looking after the scoreboard, but also they could be the one that takes over the responsibility for announcing the substitutions, because they have more time than the scorer does in order to help in that process. So that's one area where you'd expect, if you had 2 scorers on the scorers table, the second one should be doing the timing, announcing the substitutions, and making sure that the scoreboard is correct. And that's their primary responsibility. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at the completion of the score sheet. And the reason they're going to do that is because it also brings in a number of issues as we go through, that we can talk about how the scorer manages things like timeouts, substitutions, and so on and so forth. So as a refresher, this is how we deal with the score sheet. And this is the process that you would have gone through way back when you did your grade 4 referee course, and you would have done this particular presentation, or seen this particular presentation at that time, or a variation of it, depending on how far we go back. I seem to remember that mine was done on a small A4 version of the score sheet, sat on a bench at Melksham Leisure Centre with Dan Dingle, just telling me what I had to write. Things have moved on a bit, so let's just go through the presentation. Okay, so the score sheet and how to complete it. So we're going to cover the what, before, after, and after the toss, before the match, after the toss, during the match, substitutions, timeouts, sanctions, the end of set, the 5th set, and the end of the match. So the score sheet is important because it records keeps a record of what is taking place. It allows a check on the relative positions of the players, which is very important. It prevents illegal substitutions, hopefully, ensures the sanction scale is kept to, and therefore the scorer should have a working knowledge of the sanction scale, and hopefully they can then keep the second referee will need to ensure that the sanction scale is kept, keeps a track of the libero movement, provides post-match feedback to the teams, i.e. it tells them what actually happened in the match, and they can follow the match back through the score sheet. And obviously the rules require a score sheet so that we know what's gone on. So before we get that far, the score, gosh, 1 second. Right, equipment. So what needs to happen? So equipment and timing. So ideally the scorer will be there half an hour before the start, no later than 25 minutes before the start, because they have to complete the score sheet. If it's a Volleyball England event and you are doing it, then you would wear your referee uniform, and you would ensure that you have the necessary number of pens, rulers, timing device of some description, or watch is a good way of doing it. A spare lineup sheets, a notebook, and a pad. And if you're a scorer that takes their own buzzer to matches, then you will have this as well, and anything else that you need to help the process of scoring and through the match. So before the toss, we complete the information on the top of the score sheet. So we get the right name of competition. We put the name of the venue, the city that it is in, and the country. So that's either England, Wales, Scotland, or wherever you are. So know the trigram for England is ENG, and for Wales it's WAL. The date and time the match is scheduled to start. So that's not the time that it will start. That's the time that Volleyball England and the match confirmation and the two teams are expecting the match to start. What the phase of the competition it is. So in this example, it's got pool, but it could be MSL or M1 or W1 or whatever the division is, and then the match number, which will be that on your confirmation, or you can look it up on the website before the game. You then enter in the division, which is always with a cross, and the category, i.e. whether it's seniors, juniors or youth. Difference between junior and youth is that the youth is under 18s and junior is below that level. And then you need to put in the correct trigram for the teams. So there's no need on the score sheet ever to write the team names. You just put the trigrams in. And at this stage, you do not complete circles A and B because that is not known until the result of the toss. Just be aware that the trigrams are not always the most obvious for the team that you have. Just be aware to look them up and make sure you use the right trigram, and that they can change, as we've seen in the MVL this year, that some of the teams from last year write their trigram straight down, and then you find that they have written down last year's trigram and not this year's trigram. So it's best to find out what it is so that that happens before the score sheet is completed. So further, you need to complete the team roster. Okay, so it's normal for the home team to be on the left side and the away team to be on the right side of the roster list, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of the score sheet. And the way to complete this is that it's completed in number order, excluding the libero, and you put the family name and then the initials following. There's no need to write anything else in there. And then you identify the liberos, and if there is more than one libero, then you need to find out from the second referee which one of them should be the starting libero, because they should go first, theoretically, on the list. In terms of the officials, the score sheet may have 4 or 5 spaces. New score sheets will have 5. Under MVL regulations and the normal volleyball rules of team composition, rule 4.1, a team is allowed 1 coach and up to 2 assistant coaches. And they are allowed a physio and a medical officer. Now, both of the physios and the medical officers should now be registered with the FIVB in order to take part in competition, an official competition. So it's unlikely that you will get presented with a physio, and you certainly won't get presented with a medical doctor, or unlikely to get, as there aren't that many registered in the UK. But so what you would do if you had 2 bench personnel, or 2 assistant coaches as we would call them, is that you would just write them in the next line down, so that you would cross through T and put AC or something along those lines to indicate who is going to be sat on the bench. And this gives the second referee obviously the information as to how many people there should be sat on the bench. So when they look at the bench and they count more, then they know that either somebody needs to be asked to leave, or there's been an administration mistake at some point. So going back to that one, the key thing here is that the teams that arrive with a team sheet, the MVL team sheet is easily downloaded as a Word document. Teams can just complete all of their player roster at the beginning of the season and print it off and take photocopies of it, put it all in the number order, etc. And then all they have to do is just cross through players if they're not attending the match. And that way the scorer has something which is printed, and they're unlikely to make mistakes in terms of spelling a surname wrong or getting a number wrong. Okay, one other thing to note here is that the 2 captains' numbers are circled, and that information may have to wait until the toss occurs to find out what those numbers are. So continuing with their administration work, they enter the details of the first referee, the second referee, the scorer and the assistant scorer, and the names of the line judges. And note that if you only have 2 line judges, then the positions are 1 and 2, not 1 and 3. Okay, so whilst they're standing in what would be positions 1 and 3, if you had 4 line judges, that changes to 1 and 2 if you've only got 2. So just be aware of that. And then you get the toss. So the information that the toss gives you is the first referee will tell the scorer which court each team is going to start on. So the team to the scorer's left will be on court A, and therefore our team A, and that to the right will be on court B, and therefore our team B. And the other information is the team to serve. And therefore the scorer can then complete all of the A's and B's in the top of the score sheet, and also in the player ahead of the player roster. And at that point, they are also ready to get the captain's signatures. So what you would hope is that the first referee does not allow the captains to leave the toss until they have signed the score sheet. Okay, and at the same point, the coaches should also sign the score sheet. And this is a point where you could give them the lineup sheets and say, please, can you complete that immediately, because I'll want it in about a minute's time. And also, just remember that if a team does not have a registered coach, then there is no coach's signature on the score sheet. It will be left blank, as would the coach's box. But they may have bench personnel, which would be assistant coaches. But as you know, the assistant coaches cannot, can then the team captain, or the game captain, sorry, would then assume all of the responsibilities in that instance. At the same time, after the toss, the results box section can then be filled out with which team is A and which team is B. This is one where you cannot fill it out before you know A and B, because you want it to be presented as the first set of which team is A, which team is B in front of you, so left and right. And obviously you can then start filling in the set boxes with you'll know which team is A, and which team is B, and you'll know which team is going to serve and receive. Now, the way the score sheet is completed is the score sheet, you cross out what the team is doing. Okay, so this seems a little bit strange, but this is the way it's done. So in this instance, team A, ENN, are receiving, so therefore you would cross the R, and SWS are serving, so you would cross the S for service. Okay, and to speed things up at the same time, the scorer can then complete the boxes for set 2 and 3, and they will be able to do set 4, but only when obviously each team has won one set, if that occurs. So let's hope that at 12 minutes to start, we get the lineup sheets in and we write the number of so the basic way is to get the scorer to take care here so that they do not write the wrong team's lineup in the wrong section, or they don't write it in the wrong way round, that they can read the score sheet going across of going from position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 rather than any other approach. And then what they should be doing at the same time is they should be checking those numbers against the team roster to make sure that all of the numbers are correct. And in actual fact, also they can check the lineup sheet is completed correctly, so it should have the coach's signature on it. It doesn't need the Libero number on it. That'll be pretty obvious when the match begins to start. So lineup sheets correct completion. So you just need to make sure that they're legible, that there is no, if there are any crossings out on it, that it's clear. If there is any doubt or any number has been overwritten or has been written again, then it's always best to go to the coach and say, Coach, so for example, let's say number 2, position 2 here was crossed through and the coach had written it over the top. You would go to them and say, Coach, please confirm, what is this number? so that the coach is absolutely confirming everything about the lineup sheet. Now, the lineup sheet doesn't have to be completed by the coach, but it does have to be signed by them. Okay, so the way that a coach that has an assistant coach would do it normally is they would sign the lineup sheets for the match, and then the assistant coach can complete them quite happily without the coach then having to be bothered with them, and they can get on with talking to the team rather than dealing with administration. There are some key points around this part of the score sheet to ensure that you do not get errors later in the match. And these are around check, check, check. So during the warm-up, you have the opportunity and the time to check the team sheet, to identify the players, to check that the team roster has been completed onto the score sheet correctly, that the team numbers are the player numbers are the correct ones, and that the player numbers do relate to the players that you've got stood in front of you warming up, and that you've checked that you've got the right number of players, etc., etc. And just go through that. First and second referee can do this together, and the second referee can do this with the scorer, but it is an important check to do to make sure you have everybody that you should have. And then when the lineup sheets are given to the second referee, the scorer does the same check with those. And when they give the lineup sheet back to the second referee, then the second referee and the first referee should then use the lineup sheet to identify the first 6 players who are going to be on the court at the start of the match, so they know who they're looking out for. And it will also inform them if there are 2 setters, which setter is going to start the match, is the captain on the court, and if not, get the information from the coach as to who the starting game captain is going to be, and other things like who your opposite is going to be. And if you're using the process of directing players and things like that, you can work out who the directing players are. And therefore, when you get to look at the lineup sheet and look at the team when they're stood on the court to check it before the start of the match, everything is okay and you're ready to go properly. So the first service. So the way to complete it is that there is a little tick. You tick the little number in the top right-hand corner of the service box. And that is the tick to say, I have looked at the server, and in this instance, it's player number 7 of team B, and I have looked at them and they are number 7, tick. Okay, and at the same time, at the first point of the set, a cross can be put in the first service box of the player at position 1 on the receiving team, because that player will not serve until their 5 teammates have also already served. So they will come 6th in the rotation. And at the same time, you write down the actual starting time in the box start time. Okay. So during the match, we then cross the gained points in the column points of the respective team. So this is where the score needs to be methodical. So when the serving team loses service, you write the point in the box of the last server in that service, and you tick the point for the team that has won the rally. And then you check the server of the team that is now going to serve, and you tick the box to say that they have the ball and are correct. And if you get into a routine of doing it in a particular order, then you stay and do it in that order all the time. Obviously, if the serving team wins the rally, then all you do is tick the tally point for doing so. You only have to write the number in the service box when the service ends. So as each player goes to serve, the scorer should always check the player number. Obviously, if the serving team won the rally, it should be the same player as before. Don't just assume that it's the same player. Teams do rotate, whilst if it's a long rally, they forget that they were serving and send somebody else into the service zone. So just do that check. And you only need to cross off the point in the tally for if it's the serving team. If the receiving team wins the rally, then you do as the previous slide showed. And then you check that you can check the positions of the players are as you expect to do them, and this is something that the scorer can do to check the players regularly. So when they go back after a timeout, for example, the scorer can very easily check that the player who is at 2 or player who is serving is the next server. The next server on the receiving team will be at 2, and they can already check that is. And the second referee should also be doing that. When you get to a timeout, you should be wandering over to the scorer. You should be looking at the score sheet upside down. You should be identifying, can you just tell me who's serving and who's the next server on the receiving team? And then when the players go back onto the court, you're looking for those players at position 1 and position 2. And that helps you know that the team is in their correct position when they go back. So if the server isn't the correct server, then obviously as soon as the service has taken place, the sound device should be used, or if say to the second referee, wrong server. Okay, encourage the scorer not to wait until the end of a rally to inform the second referee that there might have been a problem. Now, sometimes when you see the wrong server in the service zone and they go to serve, as a scorer, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, is it them that's wrong or is it me that's wrong? And therefore, you need to make sure that that you can help in this situation. But the server, obviously the scorer, cannot give away the fact that they believe it's the wrong server before the ball has been hit. Now, if they get it wrong, they get it wrong. Nothing much has happened. The team will serve again. So it's always best for the scorer to have confidence that they are correct and that they have the right information that the wrong server has actually served the ball. I don't think we really need to clarify what we've just talked about. So that's just setting up the box, but let's move on to substitutions. So the substitution process, the scorer should be alert to all possibilities of players being introduced, and so should the second referee. You can both see them. There'll be the players with the paddles, or the player that's just come from the warm-up zone and taken their warm-up, their sweatshirt off or whatever, ready to enter the court. So you know something is about to happen. Okay, so that when the substitute enters the substitution zone carrying the numbered paddle of the player they are to replace, the scorer announces the substitution by pressing the buzzer. Now, if the scorer identifies that the player doesn't have a paddle and they should have a paddle, I've got a hand up. I can see a hand up on the screen at the moment. Does somebody wanted to make a point?
Yes, Nick, it was me. It was when you were on the number of players in the box, so you know what my question will be. How many players can go on the score sheet, please? Because this needs clarifying to teams.
Yep, absolutely. So we play
again on Saturday, and I told the team, it was a different team, it was Durham, and I told the guy he could only have 12, and he still tried to get 14 or 13 on the Sunday with a different referee.
Right. Okay. So
they knew.
So we need the competitions group to clarify this situation, because we play by the FIVB rules of game. The FIVB rules of game, rule 4.1.1, say that a team consists of up to 12 players. Of those 12 players, 2 players can, if they wish, be designated as liberos. It goes on to say that for FIVB world and official competitions, which the MVL is not, a team may consist of 14 players, and if it does consist of 14 players, then it must have 2 liberos. If it consists of 13 players, it must have 1 libero, etc. Now, the box on the score sheet has 12 players, has the room for 12 players. That doesn't mean that there are 12 players and 2 liberos guaranteed. It means that the team can have 12 players and no liberos, can have 11 players and 1 libero. They can have 10 players and 2 liberos under the rules of game. Now,
and the NBL team sheet has 12 spaces, but then somebody said to me, yes, but you could add spaces to it, but not this season.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So in the general principle of things is that as when I've spoken to the competitions working group about this, they have no problem with a team that has the resources wanting to pick 14 players. However, they have not given any guidance to any of the teams that this is acceptable, and therefore this puts the referees in the impossible position of enforcing the rules of game, or being made to look as though they are being undermined by the fact that the team can do what they like and turn up with as many as they want, and the referee will just give in and say, yeah, you can have 14 players if you want them. So I have asked the competitions working group to clarify the position to the teams that if they have acted on feedback from the referees that teams are presenting more than 12 players, and that the competitions working group have decided what to do. Now, at the moment, that has not happened, which is disappointing, because I've not seen any communication that's gone out to the teams. So I will be following it up again. Yeah, I will be following
the competitions.
Yeah, so I think that it's it's something that if the competitions group want to allow, then they need to inform the teams that they have considered this and they are going to allow it. If not, as I said to James Murphy, the rules of game say that there are 12 players in a team and that the referees will enforce the rules of game, which causes friction between the referee and obviously the team that wants to use 14 players, when there is really no need for any friction to occur if the regulations were clear enough from the competitions working group. So I shall be making that point again to them, that just allowing this to either try and seep into the rules because teams do it and the referees don't feel empowered to deal with it, or the referees are put in the impossible situation of trying to enforce it and causing all sorts of trouble at a match when you have to tell two players that have turned up thinking they're going to play in a National League game that they cannot. And therefore, it's not up to the referees to make a decision on this. It's for the competitions group to make a decision and to inform the teams. So, until that point, we implement the rules of game. But if you are in that situation without saving face, then you can. I would accept that you could be pragmatic if you felt that it was going to cause a problem either before the game or during the game or after the game with that particular team, and that you should refer that team to the competitions working group. So, I think
your email, Nick.
Sorry,
I just showed them your email that you sent it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fair enough. And I think it's a difficult one for the referees, a difficult situation for the referees to be put into, because there's been a lack of clarification on it, and just saying, well, we should be able to allow them because it gets more people playing the game, etc. That does not help the referees out at all, because as I say, we're looking at the rules of game. The rules of game say clearly that teams are made up of 12 players. The rules of game say that the team can, the coaching members of the team are one coach, two assistant coaches, a medical and a physio, whereas the FIVB rules say that the team coach can nominate up to 4 members of staff to sit on the bench, so they can have 4 assistant coaches, or they can have 3 and a physio, or 2 and a physio and a medico, or any combination of those. So before we start getting into the point where teams decide which of the rules of game they wish to apply regarding their match, the competitions group need to clarify. So I shall follow that up. But until they actually clarify it, we employ the rules of game. And the rules of game are 12 players, of which 2 may be liberos. They don't have to have any liberos. 2 of them can be liberos, and that their bench staff can consist of 1 coach, 2 assistant coaches, a physio, and a medical doctor if they have them. I'm not sure that helps, does it?
I suppose it does. Doesn't help me, but it helped clarify it to others.
Yeah, I realise that, but it would be much easier if the competitions group clarified it for us, and therefore, you know, it doesn't. It would probably take 5 minutes to clarify that. So I will be pushing for them to clarify it, because if you say it's happened again, so that means that there must be at least 3 or 4 teams now out there that thinks that 14 players is what the rules of game say, and that's probably because they've been watching international volleyball at the Olympics or the VNL over the summer, or they watch the Champions League, or they see Polonia playing in the Champions League with 14 players, and therefore they think that the rules of game have changed. But it's only it's the level of competition and the regulation of the competition that applies. So yeah, we need to clarify it to save our referees being put in that situation.
Thank you.
Is that somebody else with a point, or is that you, Guy? It's Herman. Hello, Herman.
That's me, Nick. Quick question, and thank you for clarifying all these about players. My question is, earlier on, I think that you said that if the coach is not present, you leave the signature space blank, and we have been asking captains to sign there on their behalf. So what should we be saying now, please?
You leave it blank. Okay, so just leave it blank. If they don't have a coach, then and there are teams that don't have a coach. So I refereed one on Saturday, Durham Doncaster Miners, or the Miners Doncaster, or whatever the team's called. They don't have a coach. They have 2 bench personnel, but they do not have a coach. So therefore, there is nobody put into the coach line on the score sheet, and nobody signs the score sheet in the place of the coach. The team captain can assume the role, but under the powers of the assistant coach, or that if they're on court, then obviously they have to. They are assumed to be the coach, and therefore, when they're playing on court, they don't absent themselves by being on the court, and therefore you have to be aware that the team captain will be the person that is requesting timeouts from the court, and nobody from the bench should be doing that for them.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Where did we get to? Oh yes, we were talking about substitutions, weren't we? So we've got our substitute that's just stepped into the substitution zone, and we've announced it with the buzzer, and the clever scorer will know that if the substitute is not correct, or they haven't got the paddle, or they're still wearing their warm-up shirt, or the first referee is just about to authorize service and is not looking, and therefore the whole process could easily be a delay to the game. If they press the buzzer, the clever scorer will not press the buzzer. The clever scorer will go, this is not the right thing to do, and hopefully the second referee will wave the substitute away before any delay occurs to the match. Obviously there'll be an improper request, but there wouldn't be a delay to the match. And the idea is for the second referee to also be very active here and know that if the substitute is not going to be legal, or they're going to be late, or they're not ready, or whatever, they stop them getting to the substitution zone. Do not allow them into the substitution zone, because if you let them in, then you are creating a delay, or you're creating an improper request when you could have stopped them getting that far. Now, if that player just doesn't listen to you and continues, then they're going to either cause a delay or an improper request, depending on what happens with the rest of the game. But sometimes I had it at international level where a player walks into the substitution zone, they're too late, they get waved away, but they come to the side of the court. The scorer goes, well, they were waved away. I'm not announcing the substitution. As a second referee, I've ignored them. And eventually the coach hoiks them back out of the substitution zone because he realizes that if he presses if anything happens now, it's going to be a delay. So the way to deal with it is to be proactive and to stop it happening if it is a problem. You won't always know whether the substitute is legal or not, so that's not something you can work out, but always. But you certainly can do things like checking the shirt number on the paddle, because quite often you'll see the starting player being re-entering the game for the substitute, for the replacement player, and you'll find that instead of picking up the correct paddle or switching the paddle when they were first substituted, they've still got their own paddle from that situation, and they come back into the substitution zone carrying their own paddle. So therefore you can immediately see that when you look at them, that the paddle and the shirt number are the same, and you can deal with that one before it gets to you, and before it causes a delay. But anyway, back to the scorer. So the scorer has announced our substitution. If both teams come at once, the scorer has announced one or other, and it's up to the second referee and the scorer to be clear about which team they are doing. So if you have a multiple substitution of both teams, at the same time, the scorer will indicate I am doing team A or I'm doing team B. Okay, and they will process that substitution, and at the end of it they will say they're ready, and then they will announce the other team's substitution, and that process will go through, and then they will say they're ready. Okay, so go through that process of not trying to rush the scorer. Be clear about which way you're doing it. Okay, so as a scorer, you check the sub is valid. You record, as we'll get to how it's recorded in the next slide. You inform the second referee of the substitution is the 5th or the 6th request by that team before showing ready, as you would do if it was the second timeout. And the way the scorer should do this is as second referees, you have your back to the post facing the scorer, and at that point the scorer can very clearly go to you, substitution 5 or substitution 6. Yeah, and that way you will know before they're ready that that's what happened, and then the second referee can relay that information to the coach. Same with timeouts. The scorer will sit there and go timeout 2. Yeah, they don't need to say 1, because if they don't say 2, it's bound to be 1. So this is part of your pre-match, telling them what you expect of them. Okay, when the scorer is ready and everything's complete, you can show both hands. If you've got any doubts about the scorer recording the substitutions or identifying what the pair was, as a second referee, say what's going on. Number 5 entering the court for number 6 leaving the court. Yeah, that's give them the information if they're unsure, and then go over to the score sheet and check it's recorded if you have any doubts. Okay. As a scorer, if you cannot see the substitution, you need to ask the second referee to make sure, I didn't see this substitution, can you call the players back? Okay. If the substitution is invalid, then they would press the buzzer again, or they can wave and say that the substitution is illegal, is not possible. Okay, and then be prepared to record a sanction. So our scorer is ready, looking for players on the bench, either way, all the time. Okay, particular at times of the match, they're looking for paddles and numbers given to players. As soon as a player stands up with a paddle, then the scorer knows that there's potentially going to be an announcement to do here, and as soon as that player steps in, they have to press the buzzer. Now it becomes a little bit more difficult these days because the players' warm-up area could be behind the bench, and if it's behind the bench, then the player may be entering the substitution zone from behind the bench, and therefore they're not in front of the scorer when they've already entered. But as soon as the scorer identifies the substitute is in the substitution zone, they should announce it. The second referee should be between the scorer and the post, but they should not be in the way of the scorer seeing what the substitution pair is. Okay, and as I say, if both teams are going to want to the substitute at the same time, then the scorer indicates which one is going first. Okay, not the second referee. The second referee says, scorer, which one are you doing first? And then the other team is told to wait. If you have a multiple substitution, remember that they must come together. If they're a significant way apart, then it's not two announcements. It's up to the second referee then to determine whether the gap between them has caused a delay or not. But technically, they should be all there together. And I think that if you saw Poland in, I think it was earlier, was it in the VNL last year? I think it might have been in the VNL last year. One of Vitor Heinen's great ideas at one stage that he was winning the match relatively comfortably. So at one point he decided that he would send all 6 substitutes in at once, just to make sure that the scorer had plenty to do at that particular point in the game. And at that point, you wouldn't expect all of them to enter together. They all were relatively well spaced out, but there was absolutely no delay to the game whilst the scorer proceeded to deal with all 6 substitutes, which was very well done. If you have multiple substitutions, then it's up to the second referee to keep the pair apart so that the scorer doesn't get the wrong pair. Okay, and if there's any doubt, then the scorer should say, look, if the pairs are switching too quickly and the scorer is looking down writing, then the second pair may have gone before the scorer looks up and goes, oh, I don't know who was in that. And then as second referees, you need to be make sure that you keep the second pair there until the scorer has actually looked at you and told you that it's been done properly. And if they try and do them both together, then the scorer should say stop and get the second referee, sorry, to sort it out for them. And as second referees, you need to be aware of this. And if there's anybody that's arriving late, really late, then you remember that this is an improper request, and the scorer may know this, that they're requesting a substitution before play is restarted by a previous request for substitution by the same team in the same interruption in play. So that is an improper request, and their scorer may know that, but they need confirmation from the second referee if they're to record it. So let's right. So substitution process. So the example we've got here is that ENN team A, player number 5, starting player number 5 will be substituted by reserve player number 7, and the score was 10-7 to SWS at the time. So in the box under 5, we write the player that's entering the court, and under that we write the score, and the score is always recorded. The same for timeouts. It's always recorded with that team's score first. So it's, in this case, it's 7-10 because SWS are leading 10-7. So on the SWS side, if you were putting a substitute under, say, number 7, then the score would show 10-7 for the same point in the set. So when the player returns to the court, always remember that in this case number 5 is returning for number 7, and in this case you put the score at underneath the original substitute score, and you circle the player that has been on and has come off so that they do not come back into the match. Now they can come back into the match if an exceptional substitute in that set, if an exceptional substitution is required due to injury, or with the new set of rules due to the team potentially becoming incomplete following an expulsion or disqualification. So timeouts get recorded under the points, and again they get recorded for the team that requested them. So the scorer, if there are any doubt who called the timeout, the second referee will be indicating with their hands. So the way you do it is the vertical hand is the side that's requested the timeout. So it's timeout this way, or it's timeout this way. And that way the scorer can be very clear as to which team requested the timeout. And again, the score is recorded with that team's score coming first. So in this case, it was at 3-8 or 8-3 to SWS. So for ENN, it is 3-8. Okay, so let's have a think about warnings and sanctions, if this is going to work. This is one of, there we go. Let's go back up again. There we go. Right, so warnings and sanctions occur in the sanctions box, which is in the bottom left-hand corner of the score sheet. And here we have 4 boxes. We have warning, penalty, expulsion, disqualification. Okay, so remember that a yellow card indicating to a player is a warning, and you record the player number, and you player the team, the team A or B for that player, the set that it occurred in, and the score. Again, writing that team score first. Remember that a player may enter the sanction scale higher than warning, dependent on what they've done. So the scorer will know that a player can receive a penalty before a warning, or an expulsion or a disqualification before a warning. So a player could theoretically go through the sanction scale from penalty, expulsion, disqualification, and then one of the team commits an offence of minor misconduct, and the referee can then give the team a warning. The warning is given to obviously to one player, but it applies to the whole team. Okay. If it is a delay, then under the warning box we just write D. And if it's a second, obviously you have one delay warning. The next stage is delay penalty, and you can have as many delay penalties in the match as the first referee decides. So under penalty, you would just write D each time, and you would put the score in as well into that box. Now, if it's a penalty is the only sanction which comes with the award of a point to the opposition. So expulsion, disqualification, and warning do not have any points awarded with them. Okay, it's only penalty, and therefore it's only the points under the the sanctions under the penalty column that are awarded points. And the way this is done is normally it is recorded on the score sheet with a circle, normally of red pen, and of the point which was the penalty, and therefore you know what the penalty point was because it's got a circle around it. If the scorer doesn't have a red pen, obviously as long as they put the circle over the point, then that's all that is really required. So in this instance, the penalty occurred at 8:14 to team A. So therefore the penalty was the 15th point for team B, and that is circled. Okay. And also at the top of the sanction box, you've got the improper request. And in this instance, team A has had an improper request for something, and you know that a repeated improper request is a delay. So it will be a delay warning or a delay penalty, whichever. Whether the team has already had a delay warning, then it would be a delay penalty for a repeated improper request. Or if they haven't had a delay warning, then the repeated improper request would be the delay warning. And you may need to help the scorer deal with these issues on the score sheet. So you need to know where it's all recorded. So at the end of the set, you circle the final points of each team, bearing in mind that if the team has won the set on reception, there will be no tick in the service round to indicate that the server served the ball. So in this instance, team B have won the set on service because the service round for player number 7 is ticked, and 25 has been written in the box and then circled as the last point of the match. And on team A, the last service round was number 10, and theirs was 17. And this is another thing that you get to know when you are second referees and you're reading a score sheet upside down, is you will always know that the team that received first in the set will always be one service box ahead of the team that served first when they are serving. Okay, they will always be one ahead because of the first rotation when the player at position 1 did not serve. The points which are not scored are then crossed through with hourglasses, and that is all that needs to happen in the set box for the end of a set. You then go down to the results section and you write the summary of that set. So T is the number of timeouts, S the number of substitutions, W for win, it's a 0 if they lost or 1 if they won, then the number of points they scored, and then the duration of the set, which we should have mentioned, putting the end time at the end of the set in the box. And then we know that the starting point of the next set will always be 3 minutes later exactly. So the fifth set. So when we get to the fifth set, the scorer, there is another toss completed. So the scorer then gets the information of which is going to be team A and who's got service. So they again have to complete their information, bearing in mind that they will need to write a little bit more into the boxes, and the team that is to the left hand side of them can be, if the teams are changing ends, would be taken straight across to the right hand box and put in there again. But if the teams are not changing ends, then they obviously wouldn't do this. Okay. And when the team, if you are changing ends, when the team reaches 8 points, we know that the teams change ends. And therefore you would carry the information across. So the team that's to your left goes obviously from court A to court B. When they get on court B, you write then their points at the change in the top of that little section of box here. And then you strike vertically through the points that they have carried forward, and then you carry on from the service box of the player that is serving. So in this case, it's number 3, and you would start at number 3 and work from number 3 onwards. And you'd copy across all the substitutions and the timeouts as well. So this is a completed set, and you can see that the end time has been written in, and that the boxes for service rounds 1 and 2 are left blank because they were completed on the left hand side of the score sheet when it gets transposed over to the right hand side. So this is how a fifth set should look. At the end of the match, obviously all of the information is now in the results box, and then you just need along the bottom to do your tally of the totals, and then the check to make sure that you have the correct match duration is that your total set duration plus 3 minutes for the intervals between each set will then add up to the total amount of time for the match. So in this case, we've got 89 minutes. We've had 5 sets, so we've had 4 intervals, which is 12 minutes. So 89 plus 12 is 101, and 101 is 1 hour 41 minutes. So we know that it all works. Right, we enter the winner, the trigram into the winner line, and then we enter the number of sets that the losing team have won next to the 3. So the scorer's job is nearly finished here. So it just needs to be signed. So once they've completed everything they need to complete, they will then get the assistant scorer to sign it. They will then sign it, and then they will offer it to the captains to sign, and then the second and first referee, and then any information that is required for the remarks box will be added in at this point. So the remarks box should only be completed by the scorer, hopefully. And you would insert here things like a reason for a delay to the published start time. It may be team arrived late, for example. If a starting player had to be exceptionally substituted, then you would put that information in the remarks box. You can be as brief as you need to be. So in this case, it's been suggested that a brief one would be X sub, team A, number 9 for number 11, set 1, 12-16. And that's all that needs to be there. It gives all the information that somebody reading the score sheet would need to know that that's when it happened. Obviously a protest by either of the team captains if one has been requested earlier in the match, and then any other information, like for example if there's been a stoppage in play due to injury or for some other reason, the score at the time of the stoppage and the time and duration of the stoppage would also go in the remarks box. So other issues, well, we've already mentioned that the scorer may do the technical timeouts where they're used, announcing their start and their end, recording the interval of 3 minutes, so 2 minutes 30 seconds, which is when the team should return to the court. We mentioned that the time between sets is always 3 minutes unless there's a reason for delay, and always remember to report the 5th and 6th substitutions and second timeouts to the second referee so that they know that they need to happen. And good scorers would also be telling the second referee if they've forgotten to check who the game captain is. If the team captain comes off for a libero or a substitution, they might be sat there looking at you with their hand across their chest saying, you haven't checked the game captain, I need to know who the game captain is, please. So they can give you a lot of information, can the scorer, if they're being attentive and watching. If, as a scorer, they are not sure or they're behind play, they must stop the match immediately. Pressing the buzzer, shouting at the second referee, doesn't matter what it is, do not allow the match to continue. If the scorer is in any doubt as to what is going on or what is happening, they should stop the match. It's better to stop the match and find there is nothing wrong than it is to carry on, try and correct it, get even into a worse situation, and then neither the scorer nor the second referee or perhaps the coaches have a hope of working out where things should be. And at that point, as a second referee, and I've been there, you need to be pragmatic, and the easiest way to do that is say to the two coaches, what do you think the score is and who do you think should be serving? Because normally they'll know. So sometimes you have to take their information from them and to get on with it. Okay. So as we saw, here's an example. We looked at this last time, but this is a situation whereby the substitution could have been, there was something wrong with the first substitution, and therefore in a multiple substitution this caused a little bit of a problem. So let's just have a look at this again. So Russia bring in a substitute here. So the second referee has seen the first pair go, and okay, so then the scorer is talking to him because they're mic'd up. The scorer's got a mic here as well. The scorer is saying, I don't know what happened there. Who was in the first pair? I saw the second pair. I don't know who the first pair was. Okay. So they've stopped to sort it out, and they should take their time to do it. Now, the information in this instance was sent to the scorer electronically. So normally it would be just confirm what's on the screen is what you've seen in front of you, press yes, look at it on the other side, press yes, and they then get going. But in this instance, obviously the scorer was not sure which player came onto the court. So she wanted to check it, and if the team has the wrong information sent to them, so the scorer, then the scorer has to do it manually. So in that instance, it could be that the wrong information was passed on, but in this case, it's right. The scorer told the second referee here, I didn't see what happened. Can you please stop until we've confirmed what's going on? And that's what you expect your scorer to do. Let's move on. Okay, the casebook. So now it's your turn to do some work. So there are a couple of casebook examples. We've got a couple of videos to look at. We may have seen them before, so you have to cast your minds back. So an easy one to start with, casebook 3.27. As soon as the player had hit the ball for service, the scorer signalled wrong server or rotational fault to the second referee who stopped the game. Is this the correct action by the scorer? We're not asking whether the wrong server was correct to be called. We're saying, is it right that the scorer signalled the wrong server and stopped the game immediately after the ball being hit for service? So whoever has their hand up, Tim, is that you, Tim?
It is, yes, that is correct action.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is exactly correct. What we don't want them to do is we don't want them to wait until the end of the rally. We want them to tell us immediately. Okay, and then if there's been a mistake, then you just correct it, and it's fine. But it should be done immediately. Then what that stops is teams using the same the old thing of, well, we won the rally and we should get another point. It stops that discussion, which obviously we know you can only have 1 point for a rally, and the rally was at fault as soon as the ball was hit, so it didn't finish. So you can't have 2 points, and you need to make sure that whoever's looking after the scoreboard doesn't accidentally add another point in at this point either. Okay, so the next one, 4.25, can a team request a substitution before and after a timeout, all taking place in the same interruption in play? So who've we got this? Nacho?
No, they can't. They can request 2 timeouts, but not 2 substitutions in the same interruption.
Absolutely correct. So this is one where the scorer will be able to help, because sometimes you get the incident whereby you have a substitution, then a timeout is called, and you may have the other team have a substitution, and then the original team has forgotten that way back before the first timeout they actually had a substitution, and therefore they are making an improper request. Now, one thing to try and delay this is if a team is likely to do a timeout and a substitution, or you'll have technical timeouts, try and do the timeout first. So if you've got a technical timeout, the technical timeout will always be taken before a substitution. Don't allow the substitution to happen, then have a technical timeout. If you know a team is going to have a timeout and you've got a player waiting for substitution, then you can signal the timeout and say to the substitute, come back after the timeout, and that way you avoid issues that are created surprisingly by Mr. Alekno in this particular example. So here's the player going on. So number 10 is introduced for Nikola Gribic here, and then they're having a discussion. They decide to have a timeout, and as you can see, it's towards the end of a set. And then after the timeout, they then try and have another substitution, probably for something they talked about during the timeout. And quite rightly, Mr. Labasta has issued a delay warning for that. And the reason he issued a delay warning is because the game was stopped whilst it was explained what the problem was. If the second referee was able to stop Volkov coming into the substitution zone, or if Volkov stepped into the substitution zone and then he was able to get him to step back out again, then obviously it would have been an improper request rather than a delay. So let's move on to the next one. So next question then. The team captain is injured before the start of the match. How should this situation be handled? Right, so let's go it 2 ways. Right, so this happens before the toss. Diane?
They would nominate another team captain, because, oh no, because it's on the scoreboard. Would it be marked as a remark?
No, because this is before the toss, so the scorer may not
circle. You don't circle before the toss in case they change their mind anyway.
Correct. So yeah, all the team needs to do is nominate a new team captain. So let's say it happened after the toss.
That person would only become the game captain, wouldn't they?
Right. Okay. So yeah. So the simplest way is to say, well, your team captain is just going to sit on the bench all the game, and therefore you have to do is nominate a game captain. So let's say that it's happened after the toss and we are at about 4 minutes to starting the match. And the team captain is on the lineup sheet. Rita?
They'd have to do a substitution and then put a game captain on.
Yes, correct. So you'd still expect the correct lineup to be on the court at the start of the match, but you know you're going to do a substitution straight away at 0-0. And this is one of the situations where the second referee uses a substitution signal to confirm to everyone that this is what's happening. It's not just a replacement or anything else is happening. It is a substitution at 0-0, and that you're introducing a player into the court to replace your injured team captain. And at that point, also, you would identify who your new game captain was. Okay, so thinking a bit more about this one then is with a game captain, knowing that you're only going to be using a game captain and your team captain is never going to be on the court. This causes sometimes second referees a little bit more activity. Let's say that the game captain was now substituted. As a second referee, you would then ask the coach to nominate another game captain. So when your original game captain is reintroduced into that position on the court, what happens to the game, who the game captain is? Yes, Rita.
Team captain becomes the game captain again. The team captain resumes captaincy, whatever.
So if it was the team captain coming back into the court, yeah. But if it was the original game captain that was nominated right at the start when the team captain was injured, and they've left the court, so you've had another player nominated as the game captain. What happens when your original game captain comes back onto the court? I can't see who's got the hand up.
It's me. It's me. I'm just going to guess, but ask if that person, because it's the game captain, the one who's there would stay as the captain unless they advised you differently. The one that's already on court. Yeah, absolutely, and that's what you need to remember is that the game captain does not change because somebody who has previously been a game captain has suddenly come onto the court. Okay, so unless the coach renominates a player as their game captain, then the game captain stays as the player that was last nominated, regardless of who else comes on, unless the team captain comes onto the court, when the team captain trumps everyone and becomes the game captain. And this can at times cause some issues with players not understanding who is the game captain. So this is why when the game captain is nominated, you must get the player who is nominated to raise their hand and say, yes, I accept the responsibility of being game captain. Okay, because if they say no, then you've got to ask for another one. But also what it does say is it then tells the rest of the players that is the only player that can talk to the referee. Okay, so what you get in some situations is when you have a lot of substitutions happening later in the set is that you may get, and the team captain's not on the court, is you may get a number of game captains identified. And I had a situation whereby the team captain was not taking part in the game, and the coach before the start of the match said to me that one of his middle players would be the game captain. So this was fine for 2 points, I think it was, and then the middle player had served and was replaced by the libero, at which point we asked the coach again, can you nominate another game captain? And he picked his setter, which then begs the question, why did he pick the middle in the first place? Because that middle has only been game captain for 2 points. And if they come back into the match,
they are not the game captain. The setter is the game captain. Unless the setter is replaced and that middle is renominated, the setter would retain the game captaincy for the rest of the set. So just remember that process, that whoever was last nominated is still the game captain until somebody else is nominated to replace them. Okay, that hand up is with, who's got their hand up at the moment?
Tim.
Me.
Tim, yes, Tim.
Okay, I have a question. If the team captain, after doing the toss, is injured and has to go to hospital, what happens then, and who signs the score sheet at the end of the game?
Okay, in that situation, you're obviously going to write a remark in the remarks box. And therefore, at the end of the game, you would ask the game captain to sign the score sheet in place of the team captain. So, because what they're doing at the end of the match is actually signing the score sheet to say that they agree the score, and that therefore, you know, that they won or lost the match 3-love, 3-1, 3-2. So, or you can ask the game captain to do that, but you'd have a remark on the probably in the remarks box to say that the team captain had gone to hospital. It would be exactly the same if the team captain had been redesignated as a libero. Now, under the rules that are coming in force next year, that situation is eradicated because the libero can be the team captain. So a team captain would not have to relinquish their responsibilities as team captain to become the libero, which they do under the current rules. Whereas after the new set of rules comes in, and we'll be adopting those probably next September now, that would be that situation does not occur because the libero is in future allowed to be the team captain. The only issue with having your libero as team captain is when that if they're the only libero, is that the point that they're off, you need to know who is assuming the responsibility for that point that they're not on the court. So in that instance, you'd talk to the coach before the start of the match, and you'd say, right, coach, your libero has got to be off the court for at least one rally every 3 rotations. So can you tell me which player at that time will be the game captain? And then you know. Thing with game captains is if it's obvious who the game captain is, it's the setter, and they're never taken off the court. You don't have to, when you get to a new set, you don't have to ask them again if they want to be the game captain. They just keep that responsibility on from the previous set. So, but it's always best a second referee just to check with the coach. Coach, it's a new set, same game captain, and the coach will probably say yes, of course. But sometimes they can throw a curveball by telling you, no, I'm going to change it to somebody else. But in those instances, you don't have to keep going back to checking the game captain is. But when they change, yes, you do need to check with the player. They know they're the game captain. They've accepted the responsibilities. Okay, let's consider this next casebook then. So a coach made a third request for timeout, which was granted by the second referee. At that moment, the scorer realised it was the third timeout for the team and notified the second referee about this. What is the proper procedure for the officials? So let's have 2 situations. One is the players have left the court, and the other is the players have not left the court. Di.
If the players haven't left the court, it's an improper request unless they've already had one. If the players have left the court, it's a delay warning or
Absolutely.
a delay penalty.
Absolutely, exactly. And there's not much more. So the proper procedure for the officials is to make sure the teams stay on the court if they can. If they've already left the court, then obviously the first referee's got to issue a delay, and the teams have got to get back onto the court. And hopefully you would think it may not happen too often, but here's an example. So this, I think, is possibly Romania. Although I'm not sure what the score is actually here, because this was a test. Don't worry about the score. The score says it's 3-1, and you're thinking, why can this game keep going on? This was because the European League tested 5-set matches or 7-set matches. I can't remember which one they did actually. They were to 21 points, and that's why, or something. That's what they did. So that's why this match is actually showing us 3-1. But as you can see here, the coach has already had 2 timeouts before he's got to 10 points. So it calls a third before he's got that far. So which is probably why he'd forgotten that he'd done 2 already, because he probably doesn't normally do so many early in a set. So he could have been forced into one of them. But in this situation, the second referee, because the second referee should make absolutely clear, the coach knows you've had 2 timeouts. Don't just go 2 timeouts, go to them with a signal and get them to say, yes, I know. Yeah, don't show it to their back or whatever. Just make sure they know and they say, yes, I accept I had both my timeouts. Okay, and that stops any problems like this, or should hopefully stop any problems like this occurring. But if they've called both timeouts very early in the set, 20 points or 30 points later, they may have completely forgotten. Okay. Somebody's
it's only me. I had the situation where I told, like we say, early on in the game, I told the coach he'd had 2 timeouts, and then he asked the scorer, and the scorer on and hadn't recorded the second timeout. So this is why you should always check that your scorer has actually written it down, even though you said second timeout to them. And that caused a bit of a problem, because I thought it was 3 timeouts. So did the coach, but he said, well, if I've got one left, I'll take it. So that was a bit difficult.
Yeah, and that's when I think that you need to be clear. If it's been wrong information, and we've got a case book in a second actually about it. If it's been wrong information, then you're going to have to say, look, sorry, I was wrong. You can't carry on. It's we need to carry on. In those situations, it wouldn't be appropriate, obviously, for a delay or anything like that. And you just have to say, well, sorry, we made a mistake. We gave the wrong information. But it does happen. So they should. We don't get everything right all the time. Okay, so let's another case book. Can a coach ask the scorer for information about the number of timeouts that have been taken by the other team? So 2 questions here then. Can they ask the scorer for information about the number of timeouts they've had themselves? And can they ask the number of timeouts that the other team has had? So Di again.
Well, they can only ask for their own team, can't they?
Yeah, but should they be asking?
No.
Okay, so what the rules say here is, if the information is on a scoreboard, then they're not allowed to request the information from the scorer, because they can read the scoreboard. If they disbelieve the information that's on the scoreboard, then what they would do is they would have to wait until a suitable stoppage in play. So they can't, for example, demand the information of the scorer just as something else is happening that the scorer needs to be attentive to. And the second referee should be aware of this. And normally they'd ask the second referee anyway. But if that happens, you just need to make sure that the first referee knows that you are giving some information to the coach, and therefore you don't want the first referee to, for example, carry on the match just behind your back whilst your back's turned and you don't know what's going on. And the scorer doesn't want that either, because they can't see what's going on. They don't know whether the point in play is actual or not. And also it might take them a few moments just to be able to confirm what is the information I'm being asked for and what's the right response for it. So in those instances, the coach can ask for their information if it's not recorded anywhere or if they think it's wrong. but they cannot request the information about the opposing team. In very much the same way as the captain can ask whether the opposing team is in the correct positions, and they can only be told yes they are, because obviously, and a situation that Martin and I had one day was we were asked to confirm the player positions, or it might have been me and Ludo asked to confirm player positions, and we couldn't confirm them because the team was wrong, and we couldn't confirm it because obviously that would tell the team that they were wrong, and obviously we couldn't do anything about it until the next service was hit, when obviously it would be obvious they were wrong because we were going to call a position or a rotation fault. So it was one of those awkward situations whereby the captain says, are they correct? And you can't give them any information, because if you did so, then you would be preventing one team from committing a fault. So it was quite one of those ones where you say, well, I can't answer the question at the moment, which should have told them what the answer was. Glenn, you've got your hand up on that one.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, because I know what we normally say. Wouldn't it be better for us to just say, yes, I've checked it?
Yeah.
It doesn't say yes or no. It just says, yes, I've checked it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good way to approach it, I think.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
it's an interesting one, though. Cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's one of those ones that you suddenly think about. You have to think about on the fly as to what the correct answer might be.
Yep.
Nick, Susanna's got her hand up as well.
Yeah, Suzanne.
Yes, it's not very clear to me, but now I think it will be. That is it only captain who can ask who is next server, or is it the coach or anybody on the bench?
So it should be the game captain.
Game captain, and should request it of the second referee.
Yeah. And this is where you get one of those signals which is not a signal. So you get an unofficial signal, which is them holding their hand and just putting their finger.
Yeah.
So internationally, if a captain does that and he won't ask the question, he'll just do that. And the question I'm asking is, who's the server? But obviously in that situation, you obviously have to be aware that they shouldn't be asking that too often. If it's happening a lot, then you have to ask them, guys, you really need to be working this out without having to ask the scorer every time you go to serve whether you should be serving or not.
Thank you very much.
And that happened to me.
The discipline is not there in every division, so
no. And some teams were really confused. I did the minors from Doncaster on Saturday, and they only had 6 players and a libero, and they requested who the server was about 7 or 8 times, because even with 6 players, they couldn't work out who their opposite was. So it does happen. They do get confused, and they were out of position quite often as well. And that's probably because the 6 players they had didn't always play in the positions they were being put in. So they went to where they normally stood on the court, which was obviously out of position from where they should have been stood on the court. And this happened a lot with the opposite from the setter. He was often out of position simply because he was never opposite. And that confused the rest of the team, who then started wondering who should be where. So it happens. And that in that instance, it wasn't taking any time to tell them. So we didn't make anything of it. But yeah, it does happen to teams. Somebody else has got their hand up. I'm going to try and see if I can work out how I see who's.
It's me.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Okay, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, can. Yeah.
Okay. My question is: can the receiving team, the on-court captain, can he actually ask who the previous server was if they're not sure about their rotation?
Yeah, normally in that situation, they would ask about who was to serve next. So you give them the position of the player at 2. So you'd say the player at 2 is this, and if they're actually going to serve, then you would say yes, the player at position 1 is this player. You don't then give them you don't need to give them the information about, well, if this player's at 2, that means this player's at 3, this player's at 4. That you just tell them this player's at 2. You work it out. You know, just to keep the game moving. But if they are out of position and they are totally confused, then you need to get the lineup sheet out, show it to the game captain, and say, "Here you go. This is how you need to line up," and get them to position their players. Because what you can't do in those situations is they ask whether they're correct, or they ask which position, and they don't sort themselves out. Well, okay, it's their fault, but you know, in those situations, you want to make sure that they're correct. If they don't correct themselves, and you whistle them for a positional fault and say, "No, captain, I told you this player's at 2, or and therefore," then once you've whistled a positional fault, you have to correct them. You cannot let them do it yourself. You have to say, "Look, guys, you're not in the right places. This player is opposite this player. This player's at 3. That player's at 6, etc." And make sure that they know exactly where they are. Give them the lineup sheet and say, "Right, make sure you're stood correctly, because I don't want to call you a positional fault as soon as we start again." Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but you have to correct them. Same with rotation. Same with a rotation fault. If it's a rotation fault, you have to, once you've called that wrong server and you've got that rotation fault, you have to make sure that both teams are correct before you restart. Because in some cases, the other team might go, "Well, hang on a minute, if that guy's serving, then I should be at position 2 or whatever," and they get themselves out of position because they're not correct, because the other team's thrown them off slightly. So it is one where if you do get a rotation fault, correct both teams before you then continue. If the scorer gives the wrong information in this instance, then you have to put it down to an administrative error, correct the teams, don't record a fault, and get play to start again with the correct information. So let's move on to another casebook example. Time's moving on. We want to finish. So I've got a couple more examples, which are quite interesting. Team B requested a substitution after the whistle for service. It was rejected correctly by the second referee. The game did not stop and the rally started. However, the second referee, instead of observing the game, was still busy with the scorer, checking if he realised of the improper request. After the end of the rally, the team B immediately repeated the request for substitution, but the second referee went to the scorer to consult about the administration of the improper request. Meanwhile, the substitution was applied without any control by the referees. Was this the correct procedure by the referees? Ludo?
No.
Elaborate.
Right, the first referee should not have started the rally if he could see the second referee was not actually watching the game. So that's the first thing.
Yeah. Then
after that, well.
So what about the first instance of the improper request? So what should the second referee have done?
If the rally started, as I was the first referee, I would wait until the rally is finished and then go and check the improper request afterwards.
Absolutely, that's what the second referee didn't do and should have done. So if the rally has started, if you're stopped, because if you're creating a delay, then it's going to be a delay warning or penalty. When this is purely an improper request, so if the improper request occurs at the moment of or after the whistle for service, you reject it. The service, the teams play on. You wait until the end of the point and then you do the admin. If you try and stop the game to do the admin, you've created a delay out of an improper request, and the team won't thank you for it. If the team themselves cause the delay, i.e. a substitute going in and the substitute player running to the substitution zone, which obviously then the team is not ready for the rally, so therefore the first referee has to stop the rally after the authorization, and then you have a delay anyway. But if it's an improper request, you're going to have to deal with it. What about the substitution then that actually took place?
You'd have to reverse it or go back on court again and make sure it's applied with you in control of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the question here is, has the first referee seen that the substitution has taken place and realised that the second referee and the scorer may not have seen it at all? Or has the scorer seen it but doesn't know what really went on? And this is all being caused by the second referee busying themselves about something which they perhaps didn't have to. So in this instance, you would only go and talk to the scorer when you were quite clear neither team was going to do something. If you've already rejected a substitution, you can pretty much expect it to come back. So therefore, you're waiting for it to come back before you do anything else. But in this instance, we can actually see what happened, because this is the incident. So the substitution has been waved away. The second referee is watching, looking at the scorer. There's been a rally. So the second referee turns their back. The player doesn't listen to the point to stop. Number 8 walks off in a huff because he's been substituted. Are we certain the scorer's got everything? So in this instance, the first referee needs to stop everything and say, right, can you please just make sure that everything has been done correctly? Did you get the substitution correctly? Did you get the improper request? And because the first referee has a tablet, they can see whether the substitution has been recorded properly or not, because they will know whether player number 4 is on the court or player number 8 is on the court. So in this instance, the second referee just got themselves wrong, and they needed not to have taken too much attention to the improper request in the first instance, which is what caused them their problem. Okay, before the start of the second referee checked Team A's player numbers against the line. I think we've seen this one. Let me just check. Do you remember this one from last time? So in the so what we've got here is at the start of the set, we've got a lineup sheet which is on the right-hand side, left-hand side of the screen, and we've got the actual lineup on court. And as you can see, the front and the front row and the back row are essentially the wrong way around. So the first service, which is incorrect, it should have been obviously player number 11, not 14. So they lost the rally, so nothing would have changed if it had been wrong server. But they're still wrong. Then another rally takes place, which the blue team lose. So it's now 1-2. We've still got the second referee who has not recognised that the team is in completely the wrong positions. So either they didn't take note at the start, so they now win the rally, and we should be expecting number 7 now to be going to serve, I think. And we've got number 1. Okay, so it's at this point that I think the scorer then notices that we have wrong server. Okay, and they've informed the second referee because the second referee has turned their back on the game but not stopped the rally, which they should have done first. We then identify that the team is out of rotation as a rotation fault. The team is not sure why. So this is the point you get the lineup sheet out of your pocket and you'd give it to the captain. Tell them what they should have been. Now, the query here is what the score should be. Now, the first time that they served incorrectly, they lost the point. They won the point in order to serve because they were receiving. So therefore, they weren't technically out of position until the first rotation error, although the second referee should have picked up that they were out of position on the first reception. They won the rally, then the player went to serve, so that was their first fault. So the first point they scored was not part of the error. So in this instance, they should actually only probably lose 1 point out of the 2, but I could see a case whereby you'd argue that they should lose both points. But it's a real confusing situation, and it's taking a long time to resolve. So at this point, the second referee must ensure that the players are corrected. So in this case, we've got the wrong players on court, I think. So we have to put it, and we had this discussion last time about whether we would allow the libero to stay on the court or whether we'd ask them to leave the court. We're not going to have that discussion again. But this is a situation whereby when both where the second referee has not checked the lineup, but here the scorer could have said to the second referee that something is wrong right at the start. They could have seen that there was not a check done that should have been done. Okay. I'm not, let's move on from that one. Okay, so this is a situation whereby the information about who the server should be is given incorrectly, but then the team suggested it should be player number 1. They were then penalised for not serving within 8 seconds. But then when they looked at the lineup sheet, they found that the coach had written number 6 in 2 positions instead of number 1. So in these instances, it's all a bit of a mess. And therefore, the solution to it is anyone want to suggest a solution to this one? So you've got number 1 was ready to serve. Game captain requested confirmation correct server. Scorer said it was number 6. Game captain said, probably not. I think it should be number 1. He wasn't satisfied. First referee authorised service. Amidst the confusion, the team was penalised for not serving within 8 seconds. On the score sheet, it was found that the coach had submitted an incorrect lineup with 2 number 6s. Number 1 should have been serving, as the game captain had surmised. How do you resolve all of that, Tim?
Okay, it's a bit of a hard one because it should have been tested. It should have been checked by the second referee, so it's his fault, but it's also the fault of the coach for not submitting a correct lineup sheet. But as it was the second ref who didn't check, and the team captain was correct, I'd play a let.
I'd go along with you on that one. I think in this instance, the second referee and the scorer have failed to do their checks. So has the coach. So none of them can say that they were in the right here. All 3 of them have missed this. The scorer's written it down, even though they've just written a 6, they've written it again or something. So yeah, this is the way to resolve this is to get the coach to write out a new lineup sheet which is correct, making sure that they leave the other players in the right place, obviously the players in the same places. Get the scorer to check that that is now the information that's on the score sheet, and then carry on and hope nobody's too embarrassed by it all. I think you could issue the team with a delay because they caused the delay by causing all this mess by submitting the incorrect lineup sheet in the first place. That might be worthwhile doing, but apart from that, I think that you'd probably restart the match with number 1 serving, the team having been given a delay would be one way of doing it. Rita.
You could possibly argue that the first referee should not have authorised the serve, because if the captain was on the way to approach the referee, they obviously weren't ready to play. And given that you're supposed to make sure both teams are ready before you authorise the serve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, you know, nobody in
right.
nobody in this situation has done themselves any favors. The first referee, the second referee, the scorer, the coach. So this is one where you just sort of like, well, let's sort it out and get on with the game, and just whilst at the same time you've probably got the other team claiming points for all sorts of different things that they should be getting in this situation if there are any to be offered. But I think that you would just correct it and move on, as I say, with a delay. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover. I know it's been a relatively long session again, but we have pretty much got to the end of the rule book now with Let's Talk Rules. We have got one session. Somebody asked me whether we could do signals, which might be a good one to do, a really short one on signals. You know, where we can talk about each signal and how it's used and how it's given. We could do line judges in the same thing. I'm conscious we haven't done section 1 of the rules, which is all the stuff around the size of the ball, the pressure, the weight, the lux, the temperature, the playing court, the lines, the size, and all of those sorts of things. We haven't done that as to whether that would be was something to do a relatively short chat through those just to confirm what they are, and then we've covered most of the rule book, I think.